Your tenant's move out is now coming, and whether they have given us notice that they will be vacating the property or whether you have instructed us to give them notice to move out, either way, the tenancy is coming to an end. And I just want to give you a couple things to expect, and hopefully so we can have this be a smooth process. Definitely recognize that for an owner, this is a stressful time as you're looking at upcoming vacancy and that income stopping, and you're going to be incurring expenses. So we understand that this is a stressful time. The number one thing that we need from you is to know what your plans are for the property going forward, because that is going to dictate how we do what we do. So are you planning to re-rent it again with us? Are you planning to sell it? Are you planning to move back in? This is a general video, so you may have already communicated that clearly to us, but if you haven't, we need to know that because it's going to help us prepare for getting the property ready for whatever its next venture will be. So the best thing to do is schedule a phone call with your property manager to talk about what the strategy is going to be. The next few weeks, we're going to be talking to your tenant quite a bit. We need to do a pre-move out inspection if they should want one. We need to do a final move out inspection, and then we need to get the property back to the condition it's going to be in, figuring out what's going to be charged from their deposit, so on and so forth. So again, when we know from you what your plans are, that makes that entire process so much easier. One thing that just comes up a lot is how much is my tenant going to be responsible for on the repairs and how much am I going to be responsible for? And that's an important question, and it's one that we do address, but I just want to say that can be difficult to determine, obviously, until the tenant is gone and we've done the move-out inspection and the comparison and all that. And what I will say, as an owner of rental property myself, is that I want that vacancy period to be as small as possible. It should be as short as possible. I want, from a tenant moving out, the clock starts ticking. I want the next tenant moving in as quickly as possible. And oftentimes, owners want to know, before they do any repairs, what's the tenant responsible for? What am I responsible for? And what I'll say is it matters because you're trying to figure out how much money you're spending and things like that. But at the same time, that's a secondary question. The repairs need to be done. One way or another, no matter who's responsible for them, the repairs need to be done. We need to get the property ready to be rented. So if you're greenlighting that for us as much as possible, approving estimates, sending funds so we can get it going, we can figure out exactly to the penny who's paying for what later on after they've moved out and we've had the time to do that. But if you're willing to just let us get the property back in a rent-ready condition, trusting us that we will do the appropriate charges to the tenant, it's going to go faster, it's going to minimize your vacancy, and it's going to get the income flowing again as quickly as possible. On the topic of security deposit charges, there's this thing called useful life that throws a lot of people off because there's misconceptions that owners sometimes have about what they can charge tenants out of the deposit. So we have put together a video that explains that, as well as a handout document that says this is what useful life is and what it means. I would ask that you understand that because that's going to make the conversation easier when we are charging from the tenant's deposit and explaining to you why we are not charging them for 100% of new carpet or 100% of new paint or whatever it is. So please take the time to watch that, wrap your head around it, understand it. It'll make those conversations around what we're charging the tenant a lot easier. And again, our goal in this process is to get the vacancy period as short as possible, whether you're moving back into it or renting it out again with us or selling it or whatever. So please just communicate with us what your goals are. The best way to do that is to schedule that phone call with your property manager to strategize what are we doing going forward. One more thing that I wanted to say, and that's an internal policy that Mesa has that you should be aware of. But if you are the one that has initiated the tenancy termination, which is typically done with a 60-day notice, it can be 90 days if they're on government assistance, but 60 days is the standard notice if they've been there over a year. We like to give them more notice, so we probably told you that. Give them as much notice as possible. But that being said, it's difficult for tenants that are then being forced into moving, and I don't want to make you feel bad about that. You have to take the property back for whatever reason. And sometimes it's because they weren't good tenants, but in the case where you're just terminating because you need the property back for some reason, they're now scrambling to go find a new place. So what we do to try to help them, and because it makes the most sense, and because you want the property back at the end of the day, is if they can move out sooner in that 60-day window, we basically say the rent stops when we get the keys. So if they move out in 30 days, that's great because they need to move on. It gets you the property back. And this also prevents what ends up happening a lot is that tenants wait until the end of that 60-day period because they know that they're responsible for the rent up through there anyway. And then they end up moving out late because they are scrambling last minute, and then owners are frustrated because I thought I was getting the property back. So we say, here's your notice. It's a be out at the absolute latest by this date. If they move out earlier, then they move out earlier, and there's no penalty to them for doing that. Once you say I'm terminating the tenancy, they have every right to give keys at any point up to the end of that notice. So I just want to explain that policy to you. It is in your benefit because not doing that almost always leads to extensions, and that almost always harms our owners. So I just want to explain that. So just to sum this entire video up, the number one thing that you can do is communicate with us what your strategy is. So please schedule that phone call with your property manager. Please take the time to understand useful life so that we can have shorter conversations around charges, tenant charges, what they're responsible for, understand our philosophy around that so that when we go to do the security deposit accounting, we already are in alignment on how that's going to go. Thank you so much for your business, and we look forward to this, getting this property back into whatever its next venture will be. And we thank you for your trust in Mesa Properties as your property manager.